This morning, it is official. If you are fully vaccinated with Pfizer's COVID vaccine, you may qualify now for a booster.
But not everybody will be able to get that third dose right away. A CDC panel yesterday voted to recommend a third dose of the Pfizer vaccine, specifically for older Americans and those at risk of getting a severe case of COVID-19. Early this morning, the head of the CDC, Dr. Rochelle Walensky, signed off on those recommendations. It's welcome news for millions of Americans looking for that added protection, especially those who work in high-risk jobs and are concerned about waning immunity. Take a look at your screen right now. Cases remain high. An average of 121,000 Americans are testing positive for COVID every day. To help us break down these new recommendations, NBC News correspondent Heidi Presbella is outside a vaccination site in Arlington, Virginia. So, Heidi, very good Friday morning to you. Who, at the end of the day, can get a booster, and can essentially they just go and get one today?
Yeah, Lindsay, assuming you got the Pfizer vaccine and you fit into the following categories, it is shots away, and you can walk into some of these community vaccination clinics or nearby pharmacies. So let's go through those groups, starting with 65 plus. This was the one we knew was going to happen. But here are the other groups as well. Ages 50 to 64 with underlying medical conditions, and even younger folks, 18 to 49, with those same conditions may choose, in consultation with their doctor, to get a booster. We believe, Lindsay, that those conditions will be similar to what was specified in the initial rollout, which is conditions like cancer, diabetes, obesity, heart conditions, and also that group of 18 to 64 that work in high-risk settings. Now, the FDA secretary said at the time that's a pretty broad group, right? It's not just medical staff, but it could apply to some of these other groups, like daycare staff, for instance.
Well, and Heidi, initially, what's really significant, too, about this decision is the CDC panel didn't recommend boosters for people working in high-risk settings, and then CDC Director Walensky overruled that decision. What happened there?
Yeah, there's been a lot of twists and turns here on the road to what it means to be fully vaccinated. She was disagreeing with the panel because the panel had said that they believe that it should just be focused on preventing severe disease, right? The data is showing that these breakthrough infections are causing mild to moderate infection. And Dr. Walensky said, look, we have new data coming in. This is an interim decision, and we believe we need to do the greatest good. Here's what she said. It's my job to recognize where our actions can have the greatest impact in a pandemic. Even with uncertainty, we must take the actions that we anticipate will do the greatest good. So new data coming in at the same time here that shows really a lot of benefit for all individuals who take the Pfizer vaccine.
You know, Heidi, I remember when it was a scramble when the vaccines first came out and everybody was trying to get an appointment. And if you said you had an underlying health condition or you said you had a high-risk job, you had to show proof of that. I did when I went and got my vaccine. Is that going to be the same case this time around for boosters?
Looks like not. They're not going to be requiring prescriptions or doctor's notes. And 70% of these are now going to be given at pharmacies, Lindsay. And like I said, this is as this data is coming in, and the CDC director and other medical professionals are saying that the Israeli data is showing that the benefits where they're administering this to all individuals really is significant. And so there's not going to be a lot of policing of this, at least as of right now, with this decision the way it came out.
Okay, Heidi, thanks so much for starting us off.
Let's bring in NBC News medical contributor Dr. Natalie Azar now. Good morning, Dr. Azar. What do you make of the CDC's decision and the director going against the panel's recommendations? She wants these boosters to be offered to workers who might be at high risk, like teachers or, like yourself, frontline healthcare staff.
Yeah, you know, I'm not surprised that Rochelle Walensky did what she did. There was immediate blowback and pushback from the CDC, from the CDC's decision, I should say, from some very well-regarded Twitter-savvy experts that we've had on our show and on our air multiple times. I think the biggest sort of head-scratcher there was, you know, how is it possible that an ICU nurse who's, you know, in the thick of it, treating COVID-19 patients wouldn't be a candidate for a booster? You know, it's hard for me sometimes to articulate all the different issues surrounding all of these different issues, because at the end of the day, if you are over the age of 18 and otherwise healthy, you really don't need to get a booster right now. And this this really does just kind of, I think it opens it up. It feels more like open season for anyone to walk in and get a shot, which they can do, regardless of the fact that it just needs to be Pfizer as opposed to Moderna or J&J. I have these conversations with my patients on a very, very regular basis. Not all Americans have a healthcare provider that they have a relationship with that they can actually get, good guidance on. But I've said to numerous patients a lot that it might benefit them more to wait to get the booster. And I think once you explain that kind of the science behind the rationale for waiting versus doing it now, people will come to decisions that are actually more appropriate for them.
So, doctor, how long do you see the average person waiting who isn't 65 or older, who doesn't work in that high-risk setting, who doesn't have an underlying medical condition? I'm assuming that right now you're going off of data that shows, okay, after 6 months of the shot, after 8 months of the shot, you still have immunity.
Yeah, and Lindsay, that's the whole point. We've been sort of inundated, the public has anyway, with all of this data from Pfizer and waning antibody levels. And listen, the science is very clear. We know that our antibody levels are going to decline with time. That is the nature of your immune response. But there is another part of your immunity called the cellular immunity, which, if you're otherwise healthy, should be exceedingly intact. Remember, those neutralizing antibodies really just help to prevent infection, and they really only protect you for a couple of weeks. After that, if you're exposed and you get infected, it's your cellular immunity that takes over, that actually prevents severe disease. That's a point that we've been trying to communicate to the public for a very, very long time right now, but people still are very hung up on this concept of antibody waning and that correlating with immunity. Thus far, Lindsay and Vic, the data is very, very clear. If you are not immunocompromised, if you don't have those underlying medical conditions, and you're under the age of 65, you are not the group that is getting breakthrough infections that are landing you in the hospital. You're just not.
That is really reassuring information this morning. Dr. Natalie Azar, thank you so much. Well, it has been 1 month since students in Chicago returned to school, but the public school system is struggling to keep kids COVID-free, forcing the Chicago Department of Health to now step in. According to the Chicago Department of Education, 530 people have tested positive for COVID since school began. 380 of those cases were students. All of this has resulted in some 11,000 people being listed as close contacts in the event of an outbreak. Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot says she's disappointed in how public schools reopened this year, but teachers say, no, it's her fault. They're placing the blame on her, saying she's not doing enough to help keep kids safe from COVID. NBC News Now correspondent Maura Barrett joins us now for more outside Jensen Miller Scholastic Academy in Chicago. Maura, good morning. Remind us all, what did the Chicago public school system initially promise to parents when children first returned to school, and have they lived up to that promise?
Good morning, Vicki. Yeah, just about a month ago, we were covering the first day of school back in Chicago Public Schools, a massive school district here. And they had said that they have this health and safety of the kids top of mind. Now, a month later, parents and teachers alike are feeling like that's not the case, because the Chicago Public Schools had changed their safety plan just 1 week before school started. They eliminated those temperature checks and daily health screenings that parents were to complete at home before their kids came into school. And they said that there was going to be a robust test and trace plan in place so that students could get tested weekly if they wanted to. But that hasn't been fully implemented yet. Only 3% of students are enrolled. And that, again, is voluntary, but they don't even have the vendor in place to be able to accommodate if everybody in the school district wanted to. And they're already operating very slowly. And so lots of teachers and parents very frustrated here, because when you have something like 11,000 close contacts in schools like here at Jensen, 11 of their 17 classrooms are quarantined now, and parents are feeling that there's not transparency from the district.
That's a mess. You spoke to one Chicago teacher who says she doesn't feel safe inside her classroom because of the lack of safeguards. What more can you tell us about what she's experiencing now on a day-to-day basis going to school and not really being sure how safe she is or her students are?
Exactly. Lori Torres is a Spanish teacher for the district. She teaches grades from pre-K all the way up to 8th grade. So she's seeing a variety of students every day. And she's also a mom of 3 kids that go to 3 separate schools at CPS. And so she's concerned on a parental level and as a teacher. But she says that the safeguards CPS promised just simply aren't in place. I want you to hear a little bit more about what she says is lacking.
As a teacher, I want to know that the safeguards that we know helped are in place. I want to know that contact tracing and reports of cases doesn't take 10 and 12 days. I want to know that in communities where vaccine levels are lower, that contact tracing and testing is actually happening.
And as for her mental health, Lori says she feels stressed and frustrated every day walking into the classroom with trauma, Vicki.
It is frustrating. It's confusing for teachers and parents as well. Do you know what went into the decision to pull back on the temperature checks or the daily health screenings? That seems like the bare minimum of what most schools are doing, and it's been working since last year. And what are you hearing from parents?
Well, what happened with the testing and tracing program is they said that the school had said that this was going to be a good replacement and that temperature checks weren't as nearly as accurate for kids that are coming in sick. Another thing that parents really pushed for was the option for remote learning, and they put that into place with the virtual academy, but then it only became available for kids with certain medical issues, and even that, the bar was set really high for those applications. So I spoke with one parent, Courtney. She has 3 young girls, and she was just very hesitant sending her kids back to school. A month ago, she ended up pulling them out, and now she feels targeted by the district. I want you to hear a little bit more from her.
My concerns are being ignored. They're being belittled. I'm being shamed for not having the confidence of sending my kids in. And so it makes me question like how this is affecting parents all over our district. What are we as parents supposed to take from that? Are we supposed to be confident sending our kids in? It doesn't instill confidence.
So Courtney didn't send her girls back to school. They were actually unenrolled from the district after just missing 4 days of class. So she's trying to work with the administration to get them back into some sort of school. Right now she's doing homeschooling. But even so, she says, even when everything goes back to normal, she's not sure she can fully trust the school system anymore.
Comprehensive coverage from Maura Barrett this morning. Maura, thank you so much.
The House investigation into the deadly insurrection on Capitol Hill has reached a new level of intensity. The Select Committee on January 6th has issued 4 subpoenas for former Trump associates. The committee is demanding information from former Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, former comms official Dan Scavino, former Defense Department official Kash Patel, and former senior advisor Steve Bannon. The committee says it's looking for information on the former president's actions leading up to the riot and while it was happening. The subpoenas demand any documents by October 7th and even orders them to submit testimony if they're asked. Meadows, Scavino, and Bannon did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Patel said in a statement, "I will continue to tell the truth to the American people about the events of January 6th. Here covering both the drama in the halls of Congress and the legal fallout here, NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Leanne Caldwell and NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalas. Good morning to both of you. Leanne, we'll start with you here. How did the committee come to the decision to issue these subpoenas?
Good morning, Lindsay. Well, the committee has said that they are going to ask people who they think are going to comply, and the people they don't think are going to comply with their request, they're just going to skip that process and go straight to the subpoena. So these are obviously people they think that they are going to be difficult to pin down. Now, one thing that's really interesting of the subpoena is it not only requests for them to come for a deposition, but also to submit documents. Representative Jamie Raskin, one of the members on this January 6th Select Committee, told me that while the testimony from these people are going to be important, the key thing is going to be the data and the documents, because that really, he says, is going to tell the story of what happened on January 6th and the lead up to it, Lindsay.
Well, Danny, that leads us to the next question. How much teeth do these subpoenas have? I mean, can you tell us what the committee is demanding here and whether they can get these 4 men to provide information?
Well, notice that they've asked for the most they possibly can. They've asked for documents and testimony, because what we learned during the Trump administration is that these subpoenas don't have the same teeth as, say, a judicial subpoena, which is enforced by the judiciary. The Senate just doesn't have an armed forces or a security team to go out and drag people in and get their documents the way the Justice Department can, for example. So often they ask for the sun, the moon, and the stars, and then they enter into negotiations, which seems strange because a subpoena is a pretty unequivocal document. It says thou shalt bring or thou shalt testify. But in the Senate and House context, it often means we'd like some stuff from you. Please give us a call and let's negotiate.
Leanne, can we expect more subpoenas? I mean, how close can this get to former President Trump?
We expect a lot more subpoenas. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Another member of that committee, Representative Adam Schiff, was on CNN last night. Let's listen to what he said.
No one is off the table. We're going to determine what went wrong in the lead up to January 6th. We're going to find out who was involved, who was knowledgeable, what roles they played in the planning, what expectation they had of violence, what the former president was doing. Among the biggest unknowns is what was going on within the White House on January 5th and 6th at that critical time when our democracy was being threatened.
And we should also expect that members of Congress could get wrapped up in this subpoena request, too, including people like GOP leader Kevin McCarthy. President Trump did send out a statement last night, a long, rambling statement. But one thing he did say in it is that he is going to fight any subpoena for his associates and for him that comes his way, Lindsay.
So, Danny, then yesterday, our colleague Sahil Kapoor, who's also on the Capitol Hill team with Leanne Caldwell, was saying there's not a huge precedent right now for compelling other members of Congress to testify. So for somebody like Kevin McCarthy, what could we see end up happening? And then the last question to you, Danny, is what's the end game here? I mean, we know what kind of information they want to find out, but why?
They want to find out any information that demonstrates what Trump was up to during those critical hours, what he knew and what he was aware of and how he reacted. And in answer to your other question, everything what we've learned about congressional subpoenas is that so much of it is negotiation. So it is even harder to compel a member of Congress to appear. So this is going to likely be an area of very tense negotiations, which, again, is totally unlike the area of judicial subpoenas, because when you are subpoenaed in court, you have to appear. It seems that in the Senate or the House, when you're subpoenaed, it's time to talk.
All right, Leanne Caldwell and Danny Savalos, who's in the airport, hopefully going somewhere fun. Thank you both.
Yeah, I was wondering where Danny's headed. All right, we'll have to find out later. In Tennessee this morning, the investigation is underway into a mass shooting at a Kroger grocery store outside Memphis. The gunman killed one and injured more than a dozen before apparently killing himself, police say. To walk us through the investigation's next steps, we are joined now by Jim Kavanaugh, NBC News terrorism contributor and a former ATF special agent in charge. Good morning, Jim. What is the latest on what happened, and what do we know about the shooter and, more importantly, the people who were hurt and killed?
Well, Lindsay, what we know overnight is that the Collierville PD and ATF agents are searching the suspect's apartment nearby in the Memphis suburbs. Collierville is one of the Memphis suburbs. We know they had 14 shot, 1 dead, plus the gunman. And witnesses reported that the gunman walked in dressed all in black. His face was covered. He was carrying a long rifle. Witnesses described as just a large rifle. And he fired multiple rounds. So he had large magazines. He was bent on mass murder. And, of course, he eventually killed himself.
After law enforcement establishes what happens, Jim, they're going to turn to why it happened. So how do law enforcement officers in this situation go about determining a motive, especially when the suspect isn't alive for questioning? Certainly, they're going to want to know if he knew these people, if he was maybe a former employee. Do we know anything about that right now?
Right, Lindsay, great question. You know, we all do things for a reason. The reason may be very distorted. It may be, psychologically crazy. It may be not understandable. But no human acts without a reason. And that reason has to be, uncovered by investigators. We called it a psychological autopsy. So they go back for the 3 to 6 months in his life prior to the mass shooting. And they try to see what he was about. They sweep his electronic devices. They talk to his significant others, relatives, friends, co-workers. They look at all his writings. He may have even left a message or written a suicide note. In about half the cases, Lindsay, they do leave suicide messages because this is a major event in their life. They're doing this for a major psychological reason. Although it's vulgar and distorted, they're doing it for a reason they want. So sometimes they want to tell the world about it.
all the more reason we in the media have moved away from kind of identifying and repeating their names over and over to contribute to that. Jim, Vicky Wynn here, by the way. These kinds of mass shootings, sadly, they're not new. They're not rare in this country. How have police tactics evolved to respond? And also, in a lot of times, they are able to stop these events before they occur.
Yes, Vicky, thank you. Yes, well, everything changed in Columbine. When the shooting happened there, that was a seminal law enforcement change because it was this seminal change in criminal motive. Prior to that, we had a lot of, barricaded suspects generally bent on hostage taking to escape the problem, like taking over a bank robbery that went bad or holding somebody against their will in a domestic disturbance. But we didn't have this great phenomena of mass shootings that we have now. So police tactics had to change. So what Collierville PD did was they went in right away with their patrol officers, with their patrol rifles, almost a SWAT light, if you will. The first 2 or 3 officers get there, they grab their patrol rifles and body armor, and they start going into the grocery store. And what we've also trained, unfortunately, through tragedy is our citizens to run, hide, and fight. But still we have witnesses saying, I thought it was balloons popping. And don't think that. When you hear that noise, think it's shots, act immediately. These things only last a few minutes. This lasted 4 minutes until the police can get there or the guy kills himself. So you only really, most cases, you have to survive for just a few minutes. Think fast, act fast, run, hide, fight, save your life.
It is troubling, but that is life-saving advice, potentially. Jim Kavanaugh, thank you so much for your time this morning. Former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin plans to appeal his murder conviction in the death of George Floyd. In court documents filed yesterday, Chauvin listed issues with how the court handled the motion to change the venue and sequester the jury. He's also taking aim at the trial itself, including the addition of the third-degree murder charge. Earlier this year, Chauvin was convicted of second-degree murder, second-degree manslaughter, and third-degree murder in the death of George Floyd. He was sentenced to 22.5 years in prison.
New developments this morning in the case surrounding the disappearance and death of Gabby Petito. A federal arrest warrant has been issued for her fiance, Brian Laundrie. But first, they got to find him. The FBI has been searching for him ever since the 23-year-old disappeared after his family told police he went on a hike in a Florida reserve. NBC News correspondent Katie Beck joins us now from Venice, Florida, where the search for Laundrie is still underway. Katie, it's important to point out this warrant is not for Petito's death.
Yeah, that's right, Lindsay. This warrant is actually for something Brian Laundrie did in the days following her death. It looks as though he illegally used an ATM card and PIN to withdraw $1,000 or more from a Wyoming ATM. Authorities are placing that federal charge on him for now, but add they can amend that as their homicide investigation into Gabby Petito's death continues. This could change. So from our understanding, this is sort of a placeholder for now as they continue to get more facts in. Obviously, the final autopsy report has not been completed. The cause of death not yet released. There's still a lot of missing parts to this puzzle, and before they come up with that charge, they're going to continue investigating. Meanwhile, searchers are back here in the swamp today, going through this reserve with elevated vehicles, divers and dogs, trying to search high and low for any sign of Laundrie. It has been 5 days, and there have been no evidence turned up so far. A spotlight has been placed on his parents for what they might have known or not known in relation to him coming to this reserve. That information that he came here last Tuesday was provided from his parents. So investigators are certainly stepping up their search efforts, and they are now armed with a federal arrest warrant. Lindsay?
Katie, thank you so much.
All right, let's turn now to your morning news now weather.
Bill Cairns, good to see you. Good morning. What are we looking at?
A pretty beautiful weekend in so many areas of the country, but there's always an exception. And that means I always have someone to apologize to. So let's first talk about the areas of greatest concern. We have had this rain going through areas of the Northeast yesterday, New York City last night, and now finally, ever so slowly, it's out of New York City, but now it's through Connecticut and Massachusetts. It's going to be a rainy Friday throughout much of New England. And the big question is, how long will it last? Because it's slowing down and stalling. This push behind it is kind of ending. So the futurecast does take the rain into Boston. By 8 p.m. this evening, it's very light, just spotty showers, Providence to Boston through the Cape, heavier rains up in Maine. But unfortunately, it doesn't really progress any further than that. And then another wave comes up of rain from the coast as we go through Saturday. So we may keep the clouds in play, on and off showers and a little bit of rain, even in Boston and Providence on Saturday. The rest of the Northeast looks pretty good. So again, it's not going to be an incredible amount of heavy rain, but we may not get the sunny blue skies in eastern New England on Saturday like we were hoping yesterday. So again, for Boston to the Cape up through Maine, that's probably the worst weather in the country this upcoming weekend. So let's get to that weekend forecast. And it is so nice. So many areas of the country still feeling like summer. It's still pretty warm, but the humidity's been knocked down. 75 and sunny in Atlanta is about as perfect as it gets. Chicago, 78's nice. Dallas, 86. Still a little warm. Probably need the air conditioner in the afternoon, but it's not the hundreds you had a couple days ago. And then as we head into the weekend forecast, well, this is where we're going to be watching. Again, dry almost everywhere. There's that little bit of rain in Maine, maybe Boston, but the middle of the nation is nearly perfect. We're warm out in areas of the west, but not too hot. And then on Sunday, that gorgeous weather from St. Louis all the way to the mid-Atlantic. Still pretty nice in areas of the southeast. Feels like summer in the middle of the country. You get the general idea. It's a pretty beautiful first fall weekend. Hard to complain after the wet and gross summer that we've had.
You won't hear any grumbling from us here.
We'll take it. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.